You've seen thousands of game show moments, but nothing will prepare you for what a little girl pulled from her pocket on a Tuesday afternoon in Atlanta. The letter was folded into quarters, small, creased, written in pencil on yellow notebook paper with uneven lines, and a small smudge in the corner where the eraser had worked too hard. It had been carried in the front pocket of a 9-year-old girl's denim jacket for 11 days. 11 days she had walked around with that letter against her chest, never intending for anyone to read it, especially not him. Steve Harvey held it in both hands. He didn't open it right away. He just looked at it, this tiny, folded square of paper, and something moved across his face that the camera caught before he could stop it. "Baby," he said, his voice dropping to almost nothing. "Who wrote this?" She pointed to her grandmother, standing at the podium 12 feet away, pressing both hands against her mouth. The studio fell completely silent. Dorothy Mae Hutchins was 67 years old and had been raising her granddaughter Amara alone for 4 years, 3 months, and 19 days. She knew the exact number because she had started counting the morning her daughter Keisha didn't come home, and counting became the only way she knew how to hold herself together. She had raised Keisha in a 2-bedroom house in Macon, Georgia, on a teacher's aide salary that never quite stretched to the end of the month. Keisha had been bright, funny, the kind of girl who made friends with the cashier at every grocery store they walked into. But at 24, Keisha had gone into the hospital for a routine procedure and come out with a prescription that became a habit, that became something Dorothy couldn't name out loud. Not to her church friends, not to her sister, not to the neighbors who brought over casseroles and said things like, "You're so strong, Dorothy." She was not strong. She was terrified every single morning. Amara had come to live with her in March of 2019, when Amara was 5. She arrived with a garbage bag of clothes, a stuffed rabbit with one ear, and a way of watching Dorothy's face for information, the way children do when they've learned that adult faces are where the real news comes from. Dorothy had pulled her into her arms that first night and held her until the child stopped shaking, and then she had sat in her kitchen at 2 a.m. and done the math on a piece of scratch paper. Social Security, $1,147 a month. Rent, $780. Utilities averaged $210. Amara's school supplies, clothing, food, and medical co-pays ate everything that was left, and then some. Dorothy had sold her mother's jewelry in October of that year, a gold brooch and a pair of earrings she had been keeping since 1989, for $340, which lasted 6 weeks. She had not told a single person. When her church sister Glenda asked why she looked so tired at Bible study, Dorothy said it was just her sinuses acting up. That was the lie she had been telling for 2 years. It was easier than the truth, which was that she hadn't slept a full night since Keisha stopped returning calls, that she woke up at 3 a.m., calculating which bill she could push to the following month, that she had eaten oatmeal for dinner 4 nights in a row in January so that Amara could have the chicken. Amara noticed. Children always do. They don't have the words yet, but they feel the weight adults carry, the way you can feel a storm before the sky changes. Amara had started saving her school lunch money in a plastic bag she kept inside her stuffed rabbit. $1.25 a day, on days when the cafeteria was offering something she knew she could skip. By the end of 6 weeks, she had $31.50. She had brought it to Dorothy on a Wednesday evening, just set the bag on the kitchen table without a word, and gone back to doing her homework. Dorothy had picked up the bag and had to leave the room. The system had failed them quietly and completely. Dorothy had applied for emergency rental assistance in September of 2020, during the worst of the pandemic, and waited 14 months for an answer that never came. She had tried to get Amara into an after-school enrichment program, the kind with tutoring and meals, but the wait list was 47 children long and moved by 3 spots over 6 months. She had asked her landlord for a 2-week extension once, in March of 2021, and he had said yes, but changed the locks 2 days before the grace period ended. She had called a legal aid number and been put on hold for 40 minutes before the line disconnected. She was not a woman who gave up. She had worked 31 years in public schools. She understood delayed gratification. She understood that dignity required you to keep showing up, even when showing up cost you everything. But at night, in the kitchen, she prayed the same simple prayer she had been praying for 2 years. Lord, just let me make it to next month. Just 1 more month. The Family Feud application had come from her neighbor's daughter, who had filled it out as a surprise and submitted it with a photo of Dorothy and Amara in their church clothes. Dorothy had not known until a producer called. She had almost said no. The bus tickets from Macon to Atlanta would cost them $44. She went anyway. They were the Hutchins family, Dorothy, Amara, Dorothy's sister Yvette, Yvette's husband Carl, and their adult son Marcus. They wore matching blue shirts that Yvette had ironed the night before. Amara had her rabbit in her backpack. The other family, the Delgados from Tampa, were cheerful and loud in the best way. 3 grown siblings and their mother, a woman named Rosa, who kept touching her heart when the contestants said something sweet. They had won the first 2 rounds and were leading. Amara sat in the audience section for most of the taping, which is where children go. But during a production break, she climbed down and walked to the edge of the stage and waited. A production assistant saw her and walked over, ready to redirect her back. But Amara pulled the letter from her jacket pocket and held it out. "Can you give this to Mr. Harvey?" she asked. "Please." The assistant, a 26-year-old named Jenna, who would later say she didn't know why she did what she did, took the letter and walked it to Steve. He read it during the break, standing alone near the lighting console, his back to the room. Nobody saw his face while he read it. They saw his shoulders. That was enough. When they came back from the break, the cameras rolled. Steve walked out to center stage, and instead of going to the podium, he crouched down to where Amara was sitting in the front row of the audience section, right at the edge. "Baby," he said, "who wrote this?" She pointed to Dorothy. The studio fell completely silent. Steve stood. He walked to Dorothy at the podium and just looked at her for a moment. Dorothy's chin was trembling. She had not known Amara had written anything. She had not known the letter existed. "Your granddaughter," Steve said, "wrote you something." He held the letter up, still folded. "And I think you should hear it." He opened it. The handwriting was careful and slightly uneven, the way 9-year-olds write when they are trying very hard. Steve read it slowly, in a voice quiet enough that the audience had to lean in, and the room had to lean with them. "Dear Grandma, I know you are tired. I see you eat oatmeal at night so I can have more. I saved my lunch money. I want you to not be scared anymore. I love you more than the rabbit. Please don't cry when you read this. I wrote it because I don't know how to say it out loud. Love, Amara." The studio fell completely silent for the second time in 4 minutes. A camera operator in the far corner, a man named Danny, who had worked the show for 9 seasons, put his hand over his mouth and turned away from his viewfinder. 2 of the Delgado sisters were holding each other. Rosa, the Delgado mother, pressed both hands flat over her heart. Dorothy made no sound. Her face simply broke open, not in collapse, but in the way a door breaks open when something that has been pressing against it from the other side finally gets through. Steve did not move. He let the room hold what it was holding. Then he spoke. "Dorothy," he said, "I want you to look at me." She looked at him. "That little girl," he said, "has been watching you sacrifice yourself every single day, and instead of feeling scared, she decided to do something about it. At 9 years old." He stopped. "You raised that. Whatever you think you haven't done right, you raised that." The audience broke. But Steve wasn't done. He turned to the production team. He called the executive producer by name, a thing he almost never did on camera. He said there were arrangements he needed to make right now, not after the taping, right now. A production assistant brought a phone. Steve stepped to the side of the stage and made 2 calls while the audience watched. He came back. "Dorothy, you've been fighting this alone for 4 years, he said. "That ends today." He looked down at the letters still in his hands. "This little girl asked me to make sure you're not scared anymore. I'm going to do my best." The show had partnered in the past with a family stability nonprofit called Home Base America, which worked specifically with grandparents raising grandchildren, a population of 2.7 million people in the United States that almost no policy addressed and almost no charity focused on. Steve had been on their board for 3 years. He knew the director personally. He announced that the Hutchins family would receive a housing stability grant, 12 months of rent covered fully so that Dorothy could breathe. He announced that Amara would receive a full scholarship to a private enrichment academy in Macon that had a waiting list Dorothy had never been able to get her onto. And then, quietly, he said one more thing. But Steve wasn't done, would be how the internet described what came next. He looked at the Delgado family across the stage. Rosa was already moving. She hadn't waited for a cue. She walked across the stage to Dorothy, crossing the line that separated competing families, a thing that almost never happened in the show's history. And she took Dorothy's hands in both of hers and said, simply, in English, though her accent made it sound like a prayer, "You are not alone." Her 3 children followed her across. The Hutchins family followed Steve's lead and stepped forward. 2 families who had been competing 30 minutes ago were standing together in the middle of the stage, holding each other. Steve watched. He didn't speak for a long moment. Then he turned to the camera, directly, not the way hosts usually address cameras in a sideways, performing way, but straight on, present. "I want to talk to everyone watching at home," he said. "There are grandmothers in your neighborhood right now doing exactly what Dorothy has been doing. Eating less so someone else can eat more. Lying awake running numbers that don't add up. Too proud to ask. Too strong to quit." He paused. The strongest person in any room is usually the one carrying the most that no one can see. Find that person. Ask them if they need something. Don't wait for them to tell you. He looked at Amara, who had climbed onto the stage and was standing next to Dorothy, her hand in her grandmother's hand, the stuffed rabbit tucked under her other arm. "This little girl knew," Steve said. "She's 9. She knew." But Steve wasn't done. He crossed to Amara and crouched to her level. "You did a brave thing," he told her. "Writing that letter, giving it to a stranger, asking for help for someone you love. That's one of the hardest things a person can do. You remember that. When you grow up and you see somebody carrying something heavy, you're going to know what to do, because you already did it." Amara nodded. She was not crying. She was 9, and she was absolutely certain she had done the right thing. And that certainty was somehow the most moving thing in the room. The crew was not certain. Jenna, the production assistant who had carried the letter, was standing against the side wall with her arms folded tight across her chest, tears running freely. Danny, the 9-season camera operator, had stopped trying to wipe his face. The clip of Steve reading the letter went online at 9:14 p.m. on the night the episode aired. By midnight, it had 4 million views. By the following morning, it had been shared 1.1 million times on Facebook alone. And the comments, 340,000 of them before the moderators stopped counting, were full of people writing about their own mothers, their own grandmothers, their own children who had done something quiet and enormous to try to carry a weight they were too small for. The hashtag Amara's Letter trended nationally for 3 days. News networks picked it up. A morning show called Dorothy and Amara Live, and Amara sat on Dorothy's lap the entire interview and answered every question in the serious, measured way of children who have decided that adults need things explained clearly. 3 months later, the Home Base America organization reported a 1,400% increase in donations and volunteer applications in the weeks following the episode. They used the funding to open 4 new regional offices, with a combined case capacity of 3,200 grandparent-led households. A legislative aide in Georgia watched the clip at her kitchen table at 11 p.m. and began drafting language for a bill that would create a dedicated state fund for kinship caregivers. The bill passed the following year. A year after the taping, Dorothy was still in the same house in Macon. The rent was covered. The sleepless nights were fewer. She had started a small Bible study group for grandmothers in similar situations. 7 women the first week, 23 by the third, meeting on Thursday evenings in the fellowship hall of her church. She called it simply Thursday Grandmothers. They prayed together and traded grocery strategies and watched each other's grandchildren in the parking lot when someone needed to make a phone call. It was small and quiet and completely necessary. Amara started 4th grade at the Enrichment Academy in September. Her teacher sent Dorothy a note after the first week. "Your granddaughter is going to change things." Today, the letter is framed. It hangs on the wall of Dorothy's kitchen, next to a photograph of Keisha, taken before everything changed. Keisha, at 21, laughing at something off-camera, the light catching her face just right. Dorothy passes it every morning on her way to put the kettle on. The yellow notebook paper under the glass still has the pencil smudge in the corner where the eraser worked too hard. There is something inside each of us, some quiet knowledge we carry about the people we love, the weight they are hiding, the things they will never say out loud. And sometimes the bravest thing anyone can do is fold it into quarters, put it in their pocket, walk up to a stranger, and ask for help on behalf of someone who doesn't know how to ask for themselves. A 9-year-old understood this. She carried that letter for 11 days. She had never once considered not giving it. If this story moved you, please share it right now with someone who's quietly carrying too much. They need to know they're not invisible. And if you haven't subscribed yet, hit that button, because we find these stories every week. And the next one might be exactly what someone in your life needs to hear.